I'm Emily Stone, 34 years old, and just last year, I was the creative director of my family's jewelry empire, Stonebrook Jewelers, a company my grandparents built from scratch in 1958. One Tuesday morning, I walked into a board meeting with a marketing plan. I walked out with security guards at my side, my family accusing me of financial sabotage. 3 days later, I uncovered a hidden deal. My mother, now CEO, was planning to secretly sell the entire company to our biggest competitor and cheat me out of my rightful shares. That was the moment I realized they hadn't just fired me. They were trying to erase me. Before I tell you how I fought back and what it cost us all, drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever been betrayed by the people closest to you, hit like and subscribe, because this story might be the reminder you didn't know you needed. The scent of polished silver, the subtle shimmer of diamonds under warm spotlights, the gentle clink of gold against velvet. Those sensations were the fabric of my earliest memories. They defined my childhood. Sundays weren't for cartoons. They were for running through the aisles of Stonebrook Jewelers, our flagship store in downtown Seattle, playing hide-and-seek behind gleaming display cases, while my grandfather, Arthur, would pretend he couldn't find me, his booming laugh echoing through the quiet showroom. Stonebrook wasn't just a business to us. It was the very essence of our family's identity, our heart, our legacy. My grandparents, Arthur and Eleanor Stone, launched the company in 1958. They started with hardly anything, just a small loan, a tiny storefront barely larger than a walk-in closet on a bustling side street, and an enormous amount of grit. Grandpa Arthur was a master craftsman, his hands creating bespoke pieces, each one a tiny work of art. Grandma Eleanor, on the other hand, was the warmth and the brains. She managed the books with meticulous care, and she charmed every single customer who walked through the door with her bright smile and an uncanny eye for design. Their motto wasn't just words, it was their creed. Crafted with heart, adorned with soul, they truly lived by it. I remember Grandpa once rejecting an entire shipment of sapphires because their clarity didn't meet his incredibly high standards, even though it meant taking a significant financial hit. "Your reputation is built one gem at a time, Emily," he used to tell me, his voice firm but kind. "And it can shatter just as swiftly if you compromise." By the time I was born in the late 80s, Stonebrook had expanded to 3 prime locations across the greater Seattle area. My father, David, joined the business after marrying my mother, Vivian, who was Arthur and Eleanor's only child. Dad was the calm, steady anchor in the company. He had this incredible patience with customers, a genuine fairness with employees, and a quiet integrity that reminded everyone of my grandfather. He handled all the operational complexities, making sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes, while my mother worked alongside Grandma Eleanor in design and customer relations. But here's the thing. While my father embodied my grandfather's rock-solid integrity and his endless patience, my mother, Vivian, inherited Grandma Eleanor's impeccable eye for design, but none, and I mean none, of her warmth. Vivian Stone was a force of nature, yes, but she was also incredibly strict, fiercely controlling, and possessed an unshakable belief that there was only one way to do things, her way. I adored my father and my grandfather. They were my heroes, my North Star. But my relationship with my mother? That was a different story entirely. I always maintained a respectful, almost wary distance from her, because her approval felt like an elusive mirage, always just out of reach. My older brother, Daniel, who was 3 years my senior, was studious and quiet. He never showed much of an interest in jewelry, not really, but he had an undeniable head for numbers, a true knack for finance. My younger sister, Clara, on the other hand, was always eager to please our mother. From the moment she could walk, Clara would shadow Vivian through the showroom, absorbing her opinions, mimicking her mannerisms, becoming a perfect, polished reflection. I was different. I loved the artistic, creative side of the business, the way a design could come to life, the stories a piece of jewelry could tell. But I also saw possibilities that my mother simply couldn't envision, new horizons beyond the traditional. When I left for New York University to study business marketing, Grandpa Arthur was my most enthusiastic supporter. "Bring back fresh ideas, Emily," he'd told me, his eyes twinkling. "This business, our legacy, it needs to evolve with the times." After graduating with honors and politely declining lucrative offers from top marketing firms in New York City, I returned home in 2012. The business had grown significantly, now boasting 7 stores across the Pacific Northwest. But its marketing strategies? They were firmly stuck in the past, a time capsule from the early 1990s. We still relied heavily on print ads in local newspapers and the occasional painfully awkward local TV commercial. There was no real social media presence to speak of. Our website looked like it had been designed during the dial-up era of 2001, and our engagement with younger customers was absolutely non-existent. When I proposed a complete radical digital marketing overhaul, my grandfather immediately gave me his full, unwavering support. My mother, predictably, was deeply skeptical. People buy jewelry by trying it on, by feeling its weight, not by looking at shiny pictures on a computer screen, she had insisted, her voice dripping with disdain. But Grandpa Arthur overruled her, his decision firm. And just like that, I became Stonebrook's very first creative director, tasked with bringing us into the modern age. Daniel had also joined the company by then, heading up the finance department, as expected. But he still lacked any genuine passion for jewelry, seeing it more as a collection of numbers than works of art. Clara came on board a year later, after finishing college, taking over customer relations, a role she seemed born for, mirroring my mother's meticulous approach. We were officially a third-generation family business, with Grandpa Arthur still serving as CEO, diligently grooming us to eventually take the reins. Those first few years were, without a doubt, some of the happiest of my entire life. I worked tirelessly, side by side with my grandfather, absorbing every piece of wisdom, every nugget of insight he offered about the business, all while tirelessly modernizing our approach to connecting with customers. He'd share captivating stories of the early days, the immense struggles, the exhilarating triumphs, and he imparted lessons about business integrity that no university lecture could ever have taught me. "The Stone name means something, Emily," he'd remind me, his gaze steady. "Never, ever forget that. We're not just selling jewelry, we're selling trust." Little did I know then just how painfully ironic those profound words would become. Within my first year as creative director, I completely revolutionized Stonebrook's digital presence. I meticulously built a brand new, cutting-edge website, featuring stunning 360-degree views of our showrooms and incredibly detailed product information for every single piece. I launched vibrant Instagram and Pinterest accounts, showcasing our jewelry in beautifully styled, aspirational settings that truly captured the imagination. I even created a YouTube channel filled with engaging videos on everything from styling tips to proper jewelry care, strategically positioning Stonebrook as not just a retailer, but a trusted authority on creating beautiful, meaningful moments. The results spoke for themselves, unequivocally. Our online sales, which had previously been literally non-existent, skyrocketed to represent a solid 15% of our total revenue. Store traffic surged by an impressive 30% as younger customers, the ones my mother dismissed, discovered us through our vibrant social media presence. Overall sales, the bottom line, increased by a breathtaking 45% within just 2 years of implementing my strategies. Grandpa Arthur was absolutely thrilled, his pride evident in every word. "You've truly brought us into the modern age, Emily." He beamed at me during a celebratory dinner after we opened our 8th store. "I always knew you possessed that Stonebrook business sense." My father, David, was equally supportive, often stepping in to defend my innovative ideas whenever my mother inevitably questioned them. Daniel, my brother, acknowledged my success, but he remained rigidly focused on his spreadsheets, his world confined to numbers rather than creative strategy. And Clara, always our mother's echo, would initially resist my suggestions with a practiced air of disapproval, only to later present watered-down, uninspired versions of them as her own brilliant ideas. It was a pattern that had become frustratingly familiar. Everything, and I mean everything, irrevocably changed in 2019, when my grandfather's health began to visibly decline. At 83, he made the incredibly difficult decision that it was time to step back from the daily operations of the company he had built. The entire family gathered in the hushed conference room of our headquarters, the air thick with anticipation as he formally announced his retirement, and more importantly, the new distribution of company shares. "I've thought long and hard about the future of Stonebrook," he began, his voice still commanding despite his frail appearance, each word carefully chosen. Emily has proven herself to be a true visionary for this company. David has been my indispensable right hand for decades. And Vivian, Daniel, and Clara have all contributed in valuable ways. He then explained the new structure. I would receive 40% of the company, making me the single largest individual shareholder. My mother, Vivian, would retain her existing 30% stake, while Daniel and Clara would each receive 15%. Emily has earned the largest stake through her significant contributions to our growth, Grandpa Arthur emphasized, looking directly at me, a flicker of pride in his tired eyes. I expect all of you to work together, united, to honor the Stonebrook legacy. The tension in that room was a palpable, suffocating blanket. My mother's face remained eerily expressionless, a mask, but I could feel the intense heat of her suppressed anger radiating across the table. Daniel looked genuinely surprised, but not displeased, his usual composure slightly ruffled. Clara, ever avoiding direct confrontation, simply stared intently at the polished table, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. 3 months later, Grandpa Arthur passed away peacefully in his sleep. At the funeral, as hundreds of people from the jewelry industry, from rival companies to long-standing suppliers, came to pay their respects, I truly grasped just how profoundly respected he had been. Competitors spoke with genuine admiration of his unwavering fairness, employees remembered his deep kindness, and customers recounted countless stories of his absolute honesty. My father, David, who had been meticulously groomed to take over as CEO, then shocked everyone by announcing he wanted to step back from the business himself. Arthur's passing has made me realize life is incredibly short, he told us, his voice tinged with a quiet grief. Vivian understands this business as well as I do, if not better. She should lead Stonebrook into the future. With Dad's decision to take a reduced role as a mere advisor, my mother, Vivian, became the CEO of Stonebrook Jewelers. The dynamic of the company shifted immediately, dramatically, almost overnight. Where Grandpa Arthur had actively encouraged bold innovation, Mom now demanded things be done the Stonebrook way, which in reality simply meant her way, rigidly. Where he had genuinely valued my input, she began to subtly, then overtly, undermine it. It started with small, insidious things. She would reschedule crucial marketing meetings without bothering to tell me. Decisions we had painstakingly made together were suddenly reversed, with no explanation given. My budget requests, once approved with a nod, were now scrutinized with a microscopic intensity, and often denied outright. During this difficult time, I reconnected with Isabella Hayes, a childhood friend who now worked in marketing at Sterling Gems, our most formidable competitor in the region. We'd meet for coffee occasionally, commiserating about our respective work challenges, always careful not to share any proprietary information, just venting about the universal frustrations of corporate life. The first major, undeniable conflict with my mother came when I proposed a cutting-edge collaboration with Chloe Vance, a massively popular fashion blogger and influencer with over 3 million followers across various platforms. I had spent months nurturing that relationship, building trust, and Chloe was incredibly excited to feature Stonebrook's stunning jewelry in her upcoming lifestyle and fashion series. Absolutely not, my mother declared, her voice sharp as a diamond cutting glass, during our executive meeting. We don't need some internet celebrity telling people about quality jewelry. It's undignified. Mom, her audience is exactly who we need to reach, I argued, trying to keep my voice steady, reasoning with her. They're young professionals with disposable income, just starting to invest in fine pieces for their new lives. They're milestones. They're the future. Stonebrook has succeeded for nearly 60 years without influencers, she countered, making air quotes with her fingers, a sneer playing on her lips. We do not cheapen our brand with fleeting trends. Daniel, as usual, remained completely silent, his gaze fixed on some distant point, but Clara nodded vigorously, her expression smug. Mom's right, Emily, Clara chimed in, her voice annoyingly saccharine. Our customers value tradition, not flashy internet marketing. I left that meeting seething with frustration, but not defeated. Not yet. Over the next 2 years, this infuriating pattern repeated itself, a relentless cycle. Every single innovative idea I presented, every bold strategy, was met with unyielding resistance, a brick wall of traditionalism. My undeniable successes were casually attributed to sheer luck or simply changing times. while any minor setback was immediately seized upon as irrefutable evidence that my approaches were flawed, reckless, and misguided. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but notice my mother growing increasingly close to Victor Thorne, the owner of Thorne & Cumbers, a smaller, local competitor. They served together on a Chamber of Commerce committee, and she frequently, almost ostentatiously, mentioned his traditional approach to business, with an approval that felt pointedly aimed at me. What I didn't know then, couldn't have imagined, was that these simmering tensions were meticulously building toward a betrayal so profound, so devastating, it would shatter my world. April 15th, tax day. And as it turned out, execution day for my career at Stonebrook Jewelers. Our quarterly board meeting began like any other, deceptively normal. The conference room at headquarters was set up with the usual spread of gourmet pastries and artisanal coffee, a thin veneer of normalcy over underlying tension. Daniel arrived, his laptop clutched in one hand, his ubiquitous spreadsheets ready. Clara wore a new, expensive-looking blazer that seemed suspiciously similar to one my mother had purchased the week before, a subtle symbol of their alignment. My father, David, sat quietly in the corner, his role now sadly reduced to merely advisory. His presence a ghost of his former influence. I had meticulously prepared a presentation on our highly anticipated summer marketing campaign, Radiant Summer Collection Shine From Within, featuring our dazzling new line of lightweight, ethically sourced gemstones. The mock-ups were absolutely fantastic, vibrant and captivating, and early focus group results had been incredibly promising, exceeding all expectations. I braced myself for the usual pushback from my mother, the predictable criticisms, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what actually unfolded. As I connected my laptop to the projector, I noticed my mother exchanging quick, furtive glances with Daniel and Clara. A cold knot of unease formed in my stomach. Something felt profoundly off, a sinister undercurrent, but I pushed the unsettling feeling aside, attributing it to nerves, and confidently launched into my presentation. I was halfway through explaining our targeted digital advertising strategy, outlining the precise demographics we aimed to reach, when my mother's voice, sharp and dismissive, sliced through my words. "That's enough, Emily. We need to address a more pressing matter." She gave a curt nod to Daniel, who, with a practiced, almost robotic motion, distributed thick folders to everyone at the table, everyone except me. "What's going on?" I asked, my presentation still frozen, absurdly, on the screen behind me. My mother's voice, when she replied, was devoid of any warmth, any trace of familial connection. It was cold, clinical, and chillingly devoid of emotion. "The board has been conducting a comprehensive review of the marketing department's expenditures over the past 6 months." I instinctively looked at my father, whose expression was a mixture of deep confusion and profound concern, a silent confirmation that he had clearly not been made privy to this board review, either. "We found some disturbing patterns," my mother continued, her gaze unwavering, fixed on some point beyond me. "Excessive spending on digital campaigns with minimal return, unauthorized commitments to influencers, despite clear directives, and several instances of resources being allocated without proper approval." My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat, as I desperately tried to make sense of the surreal nightmare unfolding before me. "That's completely false," I retorted, my voice rising, indignation fueling my words. "Every single expenditure has been meticulously documented and approved through the proper channels, and the ROI on our digital campaigns is well above industry average, consistently exceeding our projections." Daniel cleared his throat, a dry, almost apologetic sound. "The numbers suggest otherwise, Emily. We're seeing a 22% increase in marketing costs with only a 7% increase in attributed sales." "That's because you're using the wrong attribution model," I protested, my frustration boiling over. "Digital marketing has longer-term, cumulative effects that your short-term, simplistic analysis isn't capturing. You're looking at snapshots, not the full picture." Clara spoke next, her voice oddly rehearsed, each word perfectly enunciated, as if she were reading from a script. "The board is also deeply concerned about the direction of the brand. We're receiving feedback from long-standing customers that Stonebrook no longer feels like Stonebrook." I stared at my sister, disbelief warring with a rising sense of dread. "What customers?" I demanded. "I review all customer feedback. Our satisfaction scores are at an all-time high, consistently excellent." "Select customers," my mother clarified, her eyes narrowing, "who speak directly to Clara and me, customers who have been with us for decades, and feel profoundly alienated by your new approaches. I looked around the table, taking in the rigid postures, the averted gazes, the cold, impenetrable expressions. The pieces clicked into place, forming a horrifying, undeniable picture. "This isn't a discussion, is it?" I said, my voice barely a whisper, the realization dawning on me. "You've already made a decision." My mother calmly straightened the papers in front of her, her movements precise, unhurried. "As CEO, and with the full support of the board, I am removing you from your position as creative director, effective immediately." The room spun around me, the polished surfaces blurring into a dizzying kaleidoscope of betrayal. "You can't do that," I gasped, clinging to the last vestiges of hope. "Not without a formal vote." "Let's make it official then," she replied, her tone chillingly casual, as if discussing the weather. "All in favor of removing Emily Stone from her position due to financial mismanagement and brand misalignment." My mother's hand shot up first, rigid and unwavering, followed quickly by Clara's. Daniel hesitated for a long, agonizing moment, his eyes flicking to mine, a fleeting flicker of apology in their depths, before he slowly, reluctantly, raised his hand. "Dad!" I turned to my father, my last desperate plea, but he looked utterly devastated. His shoulders slumped. "I don't have voting rights anymore, Emily," he choked out, his voice broken, barely a whisper. "I'm just an advisor now." 3 votes against me, just like that. 8 years of pouring my heart and soul into Stonebrook. 8 years of blood, sweat, and tears vanished in an instant. "You'll be given a severance package," my mother continued, her voice flat, emotionless, as if discussing a routine transaction. "Brenda from HR will process the paperwork. We'll need your company laptop and phone before you leave today." "And my shares?" I asked, a surprising surge of anger giving me strength, making my voice steady despite the chaos raging inside me. "I still own 40% of this company." A flash of something, annoyance, perhaps a flicker of concern, crossed my mother's face, a fleeting crack in her icy facade. "Your ownership position is unchanged," she stated, her composure returning quickly. "But operational decisions rest solely with management." Security was waiting outside the conference room, not Marcus, our regular security guard who had known me since I was a child, but 2 unfamiliar men in dark suits, their faces grim. They silently escorted me to my office to collect my personal belongings, their presence a stark, humiliating reminder of my new status. Employees stared as I walked through the building, a cardboard box filled with framed photos and cherished mementos clutched in my hands. Some looked away awkwardly, unable to meet my gaze. A few brave souls whispered, "I'm so sorry," or "This isn't right," their voices hushed, their sympathy a balm on my raw wounds. As I passed, Brenda from HR watched uncomfortably as I emptied my desk. "I don't understand what's happening, Emily," she said quietly, her voice full of genuine concern. "You've done amazing things for this company." I thanked her, my throat tight, and walked out of Stonebrook Jewelers for what I truly believed would be the last time. The drive home was a blur, a haze of shock and disbelief. I remember sitting in my apartment, surrounded by generations of Stone family photographs, images of smiling faces, joyful celebrations, wondering how my own family, my blood, could betray me so completely, so heartlessly. I cried until there was no more tears left, until my eyes were raw and swollen. Then I sat in silence, the crushing shock slowly, agonizingly, giving way to a cold, clear, incandescent anger. They had taken my job. They had stripped me of my professional identity. They had erased my place in the family business, but they had forgotten one crucial, monumental detail. I still owned 40% of Stonebrook Jewelers, and I was about to remind them, in no uncertain terms, exactly what that meant. For 3 days, I barely left my apartment. Friends called and texted, their messages buzzing on my phone, but I wasn't ready to talk, not yet. I needed to process, to grieve, to strategize. On the 4th day, I woke up with a profound sense of clarity, a cold, unwavering resolve. If my mother wanted to play hardball, if she wanted to engage in this brutal corporate chess match, then I needed to understand every single rule of the game she was playing. I called Sarah Miller, an attorney friend from college who specialized in corporate law. "Sarah, I need to know exactly what rights I have as a 40% shareholder who's been summarily removed from management," I explained, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, after recounting the entire harrowing story. They can absolutely remove you from your position, Emily, Sarah explained, her voice calm and steady, a reassuring anchor in my storm. But they cannot, under any circumstances, take your shares without formally buying you out. And as a significant minority shareholder, you have substantial rights. You can request financial documents, you can attend shareholder meetings, and you can even call for special audits if you suspect mismanagement. Armed with this invaluable knowledge, I began digging meticulously, relentlessly. I reached out to former colleagues who, despite the new regime, remained fiercely loyal to me. Maya from accounting, a quiet but incredibly astute woman, mentioned something peculiar: unusual sizable consulting fees being paid to a company called Thorne Strategic Advisors, a subsidiary of Thorne & Cumber. Robert from operations, always observant, noted that my mother had been giving extensive tours of our manufacturing facilities to what looked suspiciously like potential partners who bore an uncanny resemblance to Thorne executives. The picture, piece by agonizing piece, was becoming terrifyingly clear, but I needed irrefutable proof. I cautiously reached out to Isabella Hayes at Sterling Gems, ostensibly to network about new job opportunities, a perfectly plausible cover. "I heard what happened, Emily," Isabella said, her voice filled with genuine sympathy, as we sat in a quiet, discreet coffee shop far from both our company headquarters. "The entire industry is buzzing about it. No one, absolutely no one, can understand why they would push out the person responsible for Stonebrook's renaissance." I shrugged, playing it casual, trying to project an air of detached indifference. "Family businesses can be complicated, Isabella, always have been." I paused, then, "Have you heard anything else about Stonebrook's future plans? Anything at all?" Isabella hesitated, glancing nervously around the coffee shop. "Emily, I probably shouldn't say this, but there are whispers. Rumors that your mother is in advanced talks to sell Stonebrook to Thorne & Cumber. They apparently want to absorb your company and eliminate a mid-tier competitor." The betrayal, already a gaping wound, cut even deeper, twisting the knife. My mother hadn't just pushed me out. She was planning to sell my grandfather's cherished legacy, everything he had built, to a company he had always considered inferior in quality and utterly devoid of ethics. "Do you have any proof?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a cold dread coiling in my gut. "Nothing concrete," Isabella admitted, looking genuinely regretful. "But Alexander Sterling mentioned that Victor Thorne has been openly bragging about acquiring a significant regional player at the last industry conference." As I drove home, the scattered, disparate pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying precision. My mother's sudden manufactured concern about my marketing direction, the seemingly fabricated evidence of mismanagement, the desperate rush to remove me from any operational role. She needed me gone, utterly sidelined, before she could push through the sale to Thorne, because she knew, deep down, that I would never, ever agree to it. The very next day, I leveraged my shareholder rights, asserting my legal entitlement to request all financial documents from the past 6 months. Daniel, now clearly uncomfortable with his complicity in my ousting, provided them without alerting our mother, his guilt visibly weighing on him. Hidden deep within those files, buried amongst countless spreadsheets and reports, was a draft letter of intent between Stonebrook Jewelers and Thorne & Cumber. Shockingly dated just 2 weeks after my firing. The terms were beyond shocking. They were an outright insult. Thorne would acquire Stonebrook for a staggering 20% below market value, a blatant undervaluation of Grandpa's lifetime of work. My mother, Daniel, and Clara would all receive lucrative 3-year executive contracts with outrageously generous compensation packages. And then, buried deep in paragraph 17, was the real knife in my back. A specific condition that my shares would be purchased at a 40% discount, justified by management's assessment of the negative impact of previous marketing strategies. They weren't just pushing me out. They were actively, maliciously trying to devalue my shares before a predetermined sale, to strip me of my rightful worth. I scheduled another urgent meeting with Sarah, bringing every single document I had painstakingly collected, every piece of damning evidence. After reviewing everything, she looked up, her expression grim, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a steely resolve. "Emily, this is textbook minority shareholder oppression," she stated, her voice tight with professional anger. "They're artificially devaluing your shares before a predetermined sale. We could absolutely fight this in court, and we'd most likely win, but it would take years. Years of litigation, discovery, and public accusations. It would utterly devastate the company in the process, dragging Stonebrook's name through the mud. "What are my alternatives?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a desperate plea. Sarah thought for a long moment, her gaze distant, considering all angles. "You could find another buyer for your shares, someone who would pay fair market value. Or even better, someone who sees the true potential in Stonebrook." An audacious, exhilarating idea began to form in my mind, a spark of defiance igniting in the darkness. What if I sold to their biggest competitor? "You'd need to meticulously check if there are any restrictions on share transfers in the company bylaws, Emily," Sarah cautioned, her voice pragmatic. "But otherwise, yes, legally, you could sell to anyone willing to buy." I meticulously reviewed the company formation documents that night, every single page, every clause, with renewed purpose. There were no restrictions on share transfers, none whatsoever. My grandfather, in his infinite wisdom and unwavering belief in free enterprise, had never, not in his wildest nightmares, imagined a scenario where family would turn so viciously against family. The very next morning, I called Isabella. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and exhilarating anticipation. "Isabella," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "does Sterling Gems have any interest in expanding their market presence?" Her response was cautious, intrigued. "They're always looking for growth opportunities, Emily. Why do you ask?" "I'd like to meet with Alexander Sterling," I stated, my resolve hardening, unofficially and with absolute confidentiality. 2 days later, I sat across from Alexander Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Gems, in a private dining room at a high-end restaurant strategically located halfway between our two cities. He was younger than I had expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with an astute gaze and a formidable reputation for aggressive, yet impeccably ethical, business practices. "I'll be direct," I said, cutting through the pleasantries, my gaze meeting his directly. "I own 40% of Stonebrook Jewelers. My mother is planning to sell the company to Thorn & Company, a deal that will dismantle everything my grandfather meticulously built, piece by precious piece." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I'd rather sell my shares to someone who would preserve the Stonebrook legacy, honor its values, and, if possible, even make it stronger. Alexander's expression remained neutral, unreadable, but I could clearly see a flicker of intense interest in his intelligent eyes. "Why come to a competitor?" he asked, his voice calm, assessing. "Because Sterling Gems has a well-deserved reputation for quality and innovation," I replied, my voice firm. "Values my grandfather held incredibly dear. Thorn just wants our customer list, and to eliminate a competitor. They don't care about the craftsmanship, the heritage, or the trust we've built." We talked for 2 intense hours. I meticulously explained Stonebrook's inherent strengths, its unique market position, and how our two companies, seemingly rivals, could actually complement each other beautifully, creating something truly formidable. Alexander asked thoughtful, probing questions about our manufacturing processes, our customer demographics, our intricate supply chains. He wasn't just listening, he was absorbing, analyzing, strategizing. As the meeting concluded, he made a preliminary offer for my shares, 15% above their current market value, a figure significantly more than what Thorn was offering my mother for the entire company. "I'll need to perform due diligence, of course," he added, his gaze unwavering, "but I truly believe there's immense potential here for a mutually beneficial arrangement." As I drove home, a complex mix of emotions swirled within me. Sadness that it had come to this, that family could inflict such wounds, anger at my family's ruthless betrayal, but also a growing, exhilarating sense of justice, of vindication. My grandfather had always said that business wasn't just about profits. It was fundamentally about principles, about integrity. For the first time since being brutally escorted out of Stonebrook's headquarters, I felt like I was honoring his legacy, truly embodying his values, rather than just silently mourning them. Over the next 2 weeks, I met with Alexander Sterling and his executive team several times. Their due diligence was incredibly thorough, yet surprisingly fair and transparent. They meticulously reviewed Stonebrook's financials, visited stores incognito to assess the customer experience firsthand, and painstakingly analyzed our product lines for compatibility with their own. During our third meeting, held in Harrington's sleek, modern downtown headquarters, Alexander presented their formal offer. "We're prepared to purchase your 40% stake at 17% above market value," he stated, his voice calm, sliding a detailed document across the gleaming conference table. The number made me blink, a gasp catching in my throat. It was nearly double what Thorne was offering my mother in their draft agreement. However, Alexander continued, leaning forward slightly. "We're interested in more than just a financial investment. We firmly believe Stonebrook and Sterling Gems, united, could dominate the regional jewelry market and eventually expand nationally." His vision was compelling, intoxicating. Maintain both beloved brands, preserving their unique identities, but integrate operations where it made strategic sense. Stonebrook's traditional, timeless craftsmanship, combined with Sterling's modern design sensibility and innovative approach. My marketing strategies, proven successful, applied across both brands, amplified by double the resources. "Before I agree," I said, finding my voice, my resolve firm, "I need certain conditions." I had meticulously prepared a list of requirements, developed with Sarah's expert help, non-negotiables that would protect my grandfather's legacy. First, the Stonebrook brand would continue as a distinct, cherished entity. It wouldn't be subsumed or rebranded. Second, no Stonebrook employees would be terminated due to the acquisition for at least 1 year. Their livelihoods were paramount. Third, the original Stonebrook location, the very store where my grandparents started the business, would be preserved as a flagship heritage store for Stonebrook's craftspeople. It was a sacred place. Fourth, our craftspeople would retain creative control over product design. Their artistry was our foundation. Fifth, a significant portion of profits would continue supporting the Stonebrook Legacy Fund, which provided scholarships for students pursuing careers in jewelry design and craftsmanship. Investing in the future, just as Grandpa had envisioned. Alexander considered each point thoughtfully, his gaze steady, assessing. "These are all incredibly reasonable requests, Emily," he said, a slight smile playing on his lips. "And they align perfectly with our intentions anyway. We want to grow, not destroy." He paused then. "I'd like to add one more condition, if I may. We want you to join Sterling Gems as our Chief Creative Officer for both brands." The offer stunned me, a wave of pure, undiluted vindication washing over me. "You want me to come work for you?" I stammered, disbelief mixing with a surge of triumph. "With us," Alexander corrected gently, his eyes twinkling. "Your marketing strategies at Stonebrook were brilliant, truly groundbreaking. Imagine what you could achieve with both brands, amplified by double the resources, double the reach." I felt a profound surge of vindication. This wasn't just about money. It was about proving them wrong, about demonstrating my worth beyond their limited vision. My mother might try to block the sale, legally, I warned, despite the thrill coursing through me. "Let her try," Alexander replied confidently, a predatory glint in his eyes. "As Sarah has surely told you, shareholders generally have the absolute right to sell their shares. We have an exceptional team of attorneys who have already meticulously reviewed the situation. Over the next week, we meticulously negotiated the final terms. The agreement was complex, but incredibly fair. Meticulously crafted to protect all parties. I would sell my shares to Sterling Gems and officially join their executive team. Stonebrook would maintain its distinct identity, its revered name, while benefiting immensely from Sterling's resources, distribution network, and cutting-edge technology. When the paperwork was finally finalized, stamped, and signed, I felt a monumental weight lift from my shoulders, a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for so long. One signature and the crushing betrayal would transform into an unprecedented opportunity. Before signing, I made one crucial call. My father, David. He had been distant since my firing, caught in an agonizing limbo between loyalty to his only daughter and his wife. "Dad, I'm selling my shares to Sterling Gems," I said when he finally answered, my voice steady, resolute. A long, heavy silence followed, thick with unspoken emotions. "I thought you might do something like that," he finally replied, his voice tired, tinged with a quiet resignation. "Your mother will be absolutely furious." "Do you blame me?" I asked, my heart aching for him, for our fractured family. Another pause, even longer this time. Then a quiet, almost imperceptible whisper, "No." My breath hitched, What they did to you was wrong, Emily. So wrong. I should have fought harder. I should have stood up for you. It's not too late to stand up for what's right, Dad, I told him, a glimmer of hope in my voice. Sterling will preserve Grandpa's legacy better than Thorne ever would. They value what he built. I know, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I've seen the Thorne proposal. It would have gutted everything your grandfather built. Everything. After hanging up, I signed the agreement, my hand firm, unwavering. Alexander shook my hand firmly, a genuine smile breaking across his face. Welcome to Sterling, Emily, he said. Now, let's prepare for the reaction. We didn't have to wait long. The day after our attorneys formally filed the share transfer paperwork, my phone exploded. Calls and texts flooded in from my mother, Daniel, and Clara, a furious, desperate symphony of outrage. I let them all go straight to voicemail, following Sarah's wise advice not to engage directly until everything was legally finalized, until the ink was dry and the deal was irrefutable. The messages ranged from my mother's cold, white-hot fury, "You have betrayed this family in ways you cannot possibly imagine," to Daniel's frantic panic. "What have you done, Emily? Mom is talking about legal action," to Clara's tearful, theatrical pleading. "Please call us back. We can work this out." Instead of responding individually, I drafted a single, concise group email, carefully copying both Sarah and Alexander to ensure there was a clear legal record. My message was brief, professional, and chillingly direct. As a 40% shareholder in Stonebrook Jewelers, I have exercised my legal right to sell my shares to Sterling Gems. This decision was made after discovering the plan to sell Stonebrook to Thorne & Cumber at below market value, a plan that included the deliberate devaluation of my shares. Sterling Gems is fully committed to preserving the Stonebrook legacy, including maintaining the brand, protecting employees, and continuing the Stonebrook Legacy Fund. Any legal challenges to this legitimate transaction will be vigorously defended. My mother's response was immediate and predictably furious. She instructed her attorneys to file an injunction, a desperate attempt to block the sale. The court date was set for the following week, a whirlwind of legal filings and frantic preparations. When we arrived at the courthouse, I saw my family for the first time since my brutal firing. My mother wouldn't look at me, her posture rigid, a statue of pure, distilled anger. Daniel looked utterly exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usual composed demeanor shattered. Clara appeared to have been crying, her face blotchy and tear-stained. My father, David, stood slightly apart from them, a solitary figure, his expression unreadable, his divided loyalties painfully evident. The hearing was brief, surprisingly decisive, and utterly anticlimactic. The judge, after meticulously reviewing the comprehensive documentation we presented, ruled that I had acted entirely within my rights as a shareholder. The injunction was unequivocally denied, and the sale was allowed to proceed immediately. Outside the courthouse, a throng of reporters from local business publications waited, their cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Alexander handled most of the questions with diplomatic professionalism, eloquently emphasizing the positive aspects of the acquisition and Sterling's unwavering commitment to maintaining the integrity of both brands. When asked how it felt to sell my shares to a competitor, I replied simply, my voice clear and firm. Sterling Gems represents the values my grandfather instilled in me: quality, innovation, and unwavering respect for tradition. This partnership ensures those values will continue to shine brightly for generations to come. As we walked to our cars, my father approached me alone, his steps hesitant. "Your grandfather would be so proud of how you've handled this, Emily," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and admiration. "He always said you had the best business mind in the family. He knew." His words, spoken then, meant more to me than he could ever possibly know. News of the acquisition spread like wildfire through the industry. The headline in Jewelry Today read, "Sterling acquires controlling interest in Stonebrook, blocks Thorne takeover." Local business journals ran feature articles analyzing the profound impact on the regional market, speculating endlessly about the future of both companies. Industry insiders, the Whisper Network, buzzed with theories about how this power shift would reshape the competitive landscape. 3 days after the court ruling, Alexander and I, accompanied by Sterling's executive team and attorneys, arrived at Stonebrook's headquarters for the first official meeting of the new combined leadership. The tension in the boardroom was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother sat defiantly at the head of the table, refusing to symbolically surrender the CEO position, even though Sterling now unequivocally controlled the company. Daniel and Clara flanked her, both looking incredibly uncomfortable, their usual bravado gone. My father had deliberately chosen a seat halfway down the table, a clear physical manifestation of his divided loyalties. Alexander opened the meeting with his characteristic diplomatic professionalism. Today marks a new exciting chapter for both our companies, he began, his voice calm and reassuring. We're not here to dismantle Stonebrook, but to strengthen it. The Stonebrook brand has a proud, rich history that we intend to honor while simultaneously creating new opportunities for growth and innovation. My mother's response was ice cold, her voice a chilling monotone. Let's dispense with the corporate platitudes, Mr. Sterling, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. My daughter has betrayed her family and sold out her grandfather's legacy. Whatever happens now, that immutable fact remains unchanged. I felt a surge of heat rise in my cheeks, a flush of anger, but I maintained my composure, my voice steady. This isn't about betrayal, Mom, I countered, looking directly at her. It's about protection. I have documentation proving you plan to sell to Thorne at below market value, knowing full well they would dismantle the Stonebrook brand. How is that honoring Grandpa's legacy? I slid copies of Thorne's internal strategy document across the table, information Isabella had shrewdly provided from her industry sources, information that was now irrefutable proof. We were negotiating, she snapped defensively, her composure finally cracking. That's what business is about. Negotiating a fire sale that would have fired most of our skilled craftspeople and liquidated our entire inventory? I countered, my voice rising in disbelief. The Thorne deal would have kept this company in local hands, that would have destroyed its soul. Daniel picked up the document, his eyes widening in horror as he read through its chilling contents. Mom, is this true? He stammered, his voice laced with shock. Thorne was really planning to close 4 of our locations? Consolidation is part of any acquisition, my mother replied defensively, her voice strained. There would have been some changes, yes, but they were necessary for long-term stability. Clara, who had been quietly simmering, suddenly turned to me, her face contorted with anger. You've ruined everything, Emily. Mom was securing our future, and now we'll be taking orders from competitors. Alexander intervened smoothly, his voice cutting through the escalating tension. No one will be taking orders. This is a partnership. Stonebrook remains Stonebrook. What changes is that we now have combined resources to compete more effectively in an increasingly challenging market. He then calmly, professionally outlined the integration plan, emphasizing the crucial protections I had negotiated for Stonebrook's employees, its brand identity, and its founding principles. As he spoke, I could see my father nodding slightly, a subtle sign of approval, while Daniel looked increasingly thoughtful, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. When the presentation concluded, my mother stood abruptly, pushing her chair back with a harsh scrape. I need to consider my position moving forward, she announced, her voice strained but still defiant. If Sterling now controls Stonebrook, perhaps it's time for new leadership altogether. It was a transparent threat of resignation, a calculated move designed to create guilt, to force them to beg her to stay, to maintain some semblance of leverage. But Alexander handled it expertly, calmly. Vivian, your knowledge of this company is valuable, and we would prefer you stay on, he said, his voice even. However, if you choose to step down, we respect that decision and would ensure a generous retirement package reflecting your years of service. The complete lack of panic, the calm acceptance of her threatened departure, clearly took my mother completely by surprise. She had expected to be begged, to be indispensable. Instead, she was being treated as respected. Yes, but ultimately, gracefully replaceable. As the meeting adjourned, Daniel quietly asked to speak with me privately. We found an empty office, my old office, ironically enough, still cleared out for my hasty departure. Did you know what Mom was really planning with Thorne? He asked without preamble, his voice low, a genuine tremor in it. Not until after you all fired me, I replied honestly, my gaze direct. That's when I started investigating. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of our father, a sign of deep distress. She told us Thorne would maintain the Stonebrook brand and keep most operations intact. She said the alternative was bankruptcy within 5 years due to changing market conditions, and you believe that? Our financials were stronger than ever, Daniel, I exclaimed, my voice rising slightly. I'm a numbers guy, Emily. I saw the projections she provided, he said simply, his voice weary. He paused. Then, a profound admission. Projections I now realize were manipulated, designed to show a downward trend. The admission genuinely surprised me, the weight of his guilt tangible. Why are you telling me this? Because I was wrong, he said simply, looking me straight in the eye, genuine remorse etched on his face. I should have verified the data independently. I should have stood up for you at that board meeting. I am sorry, Emily, truly sorry. It wasn't enough to completely heal the deep wound, not yet, but it was a start. It was a crack in the wall, a glimpse of the brother I once knew. What will you do now? I asked. Stay on if Sterling will have me. Try to protect what's left of Grandpa's company, he hesitated. Then, would you put in a good word for me with Alexander? I promised to speak with Daniel, not entirely out of forgiveness, but because I knew, objectively, that his financial expertise was genuinely valuable to the company, and he had finally shown a flicker of integrity. Over the following weeks, the integration began in earnest. As expected, my mother resigned rather than work under the new structure, her pride too immense to bend. Clara initially threatened to leave as well, her loyalty to Vivian absolute, but she changed her mind when she realized her job prospects elsewhere were limited, and her skills were more valued within Stonebrook than she had known. The Stonebrook employees, after initial uncertainty and worry, largely embraced the changes when they understood their jobs were secure, and that the Stonebrook craftsmanship tradition would continue to be honored and celebrated. Some even expressed immense relief that the Thorne deal had fallen through, as rumors about mass layoffs and outsourcing had already been circulating widely. My new role as Chief Creative Officer for both brands energized me in ways I hadn't thought possible. I immediately launched a bold unifying marketing campaign, highlighting the combined heritage of Stonebrook's traditional, enduring craftsmanship and Sterling's innovative, contemporary design. Our tagline, timeless quality, contemporary vision. The response from customers was overwhelmingly positive, a resounding success. 3 months after the acquisition, I received an unexpected email from my mother. It was brief, formal, and utterly devoid of personal warmth. I still believe you made a grave mistake, it read. However, I acknowledge that Sterling Gems has maintained the Stonebrook name with more integrity than I anticipated. Your grandfather's portrait remains in the lobby, which I appreciate. It wasn't an apology, not by a long shot, but from Vivian Stone, it was as close as I would likely ever get to one. 1 year after selling my shares to Sterling Gems, I stood in the original Stonebrook Jewelers showroom, now beautifully renovated and gleaming as our heritage flagship store. Photographs of my grandparents, Arthur and Eleanor, hung prominently near the entrance, their smiles radiating warmth, alongside a polished plaque detailing the company's incredible history. The merger had proven even more successful than Alexander had projected. Stonebrook's traditional customer base remained fiercely loyal, while also embracing some of Sterling's more contemporary offerings, expanding their tastes. Meanwhile, Sterling's younger clientele discovered Stonebrook's unparalleled craftsmanship, often investing in forever pieces like engagement rings and heirloom necklaces, while choosing Sterling's more affordable, trend-sensitive options for everyday wear. My professional life had flourished, reaching heights I could only have dreamed of. But the personal fallout, predictably, had been mixed, complicated, messy. My relationship with my mother remained strained, a brittle thing, our interactions limited to occasional unavoidable family events where we maintained civil but undeniably distant cordiality. Daniel, to everyone's surprise, had grown immensely, transforming into a stronger, more independent executive, finally freed from our mother's domineering influence. He found his true voice within the combined company, and became a valuable, indispensable bridge between the Stonebrook and Sterling cultures, understanding both. Clara initially remained hostile, blaming me for our mother's unhappiness, a relentless echo of Vivian's bitterness. But after 6 months under the new leadership that actually valued her customer insights and listened to her, she began to genuinely thrive, finding confidence she never had. During a Christmas party, after several glasses of champagne, she confessed, her voice soft with genuine regret. "I was wrong about you, Emily. I truly thought you were destroying our family business, but you saved it? You really did." My father, David, torn between his wife and daughter, maintained relationships with both of us, but never simultaneously. We had lunch every other week, carefully avoiding any discussion of my mother, focusing instead on his newfound joy in retirement, woodworking, ironically enough, in a small workshop behind their house. The entire experience had changed me in profound, indelible ways. The betrayal had been devastating, a wound that went bone deep, but the arduous recovery had made me stronger, more resilient, and unshakably confident in my own judgment, my own moral compass. 6 months after the merger, I quietly launched a side business, Lumina Legacy Consulting, dedicated to helping family-owned companies navigate the treacherous waters of succession planning and intergenerational business transitions. My personal story, raw and honest, resonated deeply with clients, and the business grew rapidly through word of mouth, a testament to its need. "What happened to you, Emily, happens in family businesses every single day," my first client told me, her voice filled with understanding. "But most people don't find a way to turn it around, to reclaim their narrative, like you did." In my consulting work, I emphasize the critical importance of clear, honest communication, of formal agreements, even between family members, and above all, of making business decisions based purely on capability and competence, rather than blind family position or obligation. My grandfather had always sagely said that business problems were usually people problems in disguise, simmering beneath the surface. The profound truth of his wisdom had never been clearer to me than it was now, as I helped other families avoid the very pitfalls that had so brutally torn mine apart. On the anniversary of the merger, Alexander hosted a magnificent celebration at Sterling headquarters, a testament to our shared success. During his speech, he surprised me by announcing the creation of the Arthur Stone Innovation Scholarship, a fund dedicated to fostering education for young people genuinely interested in jewelry design and business. "Emily taught us that honoring tradition doesn't mean living in the past," he said, raising a glass in my direction, his eyes warm with respect. "The Stonebrook legacy continues, not just in beautiful jewelry, but in enduring values, integrity, quality, and the courage to stand up for what's right." Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and the crowd thinned, I found a quiet moment alone, a chance to reflect. I thought about my grandfather, Arthur, and what he would make of everything that had happened, of the winding, painful path I had walked. I like to think he would be proud, not just of saving his company, of preserving its soul, but of me finding new purpose, of me reaching out and helping others navigate similar, heartbreaking challenges. The journey had been incredibly painful, agonizing at times, but it was without a doubt necessary. I had lost the family business as I knew it, the cozy, familiar world I had grown up in, but I had preserved its essence, its core values, in a new, stronger form. I had lost some family relationships, fractured beyond repair, but I had strengthened others, finding new depth, and formed new connections that were often far more authentic, more fulfilling than what I had lost. Most importantly, I had discovered my own worth, my own strength, beyond familial approval or my position within the company. The very act of standing up for myself, of refusing to be silent, something I might never have done without being pushed to the absolute brink, had revealed hidden strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Life rarely gives us clean victories or total defeats. Instead, it offers messy, complicated outcomes that require us to constantly reassess what truly matters, what is genuinely important. In my case, what mattered wasn't the family business itself, not just the name on the door, but the profound values it represented. Values I could carry forward, embody, and fight for, even after the deepest betrayal. So have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and your own integrity, your own sense of what's right? I'd absolutely love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found my journey inspiring. Subscribe for more real-life stories of overcoming family business challenges, and please share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar situations, feeling trapped or betrayed. Remember, sometimes losing what you thought mattered most opens the door to discovering what you truly, truly need. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to stand up for yourself, even when it's the hardest thing you've ever had to do.